Is the Zoom on? Are people joining on Zoom? Do you know if Scott Cherry is there? Okay, good morning, Scott. This was supposed to be his presentation. My dear friend and brother and fellow laborer in the gospel, Scott Cherry, was the one who started organizing this park ministry after he tried multiple other ways. And he said, I was surprised, why did I not see the obvious all along? And that is to go to the most crowded park in Dearborn and just talk to Muslims there about the gospel. And I reminded him that this is probably what Thomas Edison thought of when he said, why did I not think of this specific filament after he tried 100,000, 10,000 ones before the first light bulb worked? We will be talking about the ministry that we are doing every summer. We plan to do this ministry every summer in Dearborn. You may be familiar already with the city of Dearborn. Dearborn, a very rich, very big city. We love our community, and it has the biggest Middle Eastern concentration anywhere outside the Middle East. Not population. I think the biggest Muslim population in the United States is in California, but they don't all live in one place. And Dearborn, they live there, they congregate, and most of them are living in the eastern part of Dearborn. So in a sense, Dearborn is the global front line between the Muslim world and the Christian world. Not only is there a very strong Muslim community there, but a very strong mission work there as well. If you are a Muslim in Dearborn, Lord help you, especially in the summertime, your door would be knocked by a missionary almost every day at one point. And so that makes Dearborn very unique. This is the biggest door for ministry in the Muslim world. I mean, you can go to Saudi Arabia, you can go to Iran, but you would not be in the front lines, and you will have to be under the radar. And you will be either by yourself or by a very limited ministry that you can work through, a platform. But in Dearborn, there are a lot of Christians who believe in the Great Commission, who believe that the Great Commission is for all of us Christians. And not only do we have people there who share the gospel with Muslims, but we receive a lot of visitors every year, either to tour and to see the work there, or to train, to be equipped to take the gospel overseas to the Muslim countries there. So in a sense, Dearborn is also a boot camp for those kind of missionaries who want to share the gospel with Muslims. You may have attended my conversion story from a couple of days ago, in which I finished with my graduation from a school in Lubbock, Texas, Sunset International Bible Institute. We had an evangelism teacher from Rochester, Michigan, there in Lubbock, and he was the one who suggested that I should relocate to the Dearborn area upon my graduation. That was a very intriguing part of my life. I had just left Iraq, escaping the Muslim world. I had so much bitterness that I feel remorseful for now. And I decided to cut all my ties with the Muslim world and to never be in any place that resembles a Muslim community. And it was during that time, with the rise of ISIS, and Facebook and YouTube did not have the guidelines that prevented ISIS from posting those beheading videos and executions, and so I had so much resentment and fear, and this is not Christian. And that teacher invited me to go on a few-day vacation in Detroit and Dearborn, and that's where I got to meet some of those missionaries, including Scott Cherry. He does not remember that, and another minister who is the pastor of the Springwells Church, Trey Hancock, and I did talk about him. And I saw him sharing the gospel with an Iraqi Muslim. And the Arab in me was kind of ashamed. I thought this or these people will not like my people, or will not love my relatives, or should not love my relatives more than I should. And so that's when I started viewing Muslims in a totally different perspective. I started seeing them as victims and not felons. And I relocated to Dearborn, and the Lord has taken care of all the details. I have a house there. I'm working with a church. I'm working with these missionaries, and we build each other in the Christian faith, and we spur each other to all good kind of work. Before I talk about the work itself, the park ministry, I will be talking about how I got connected to these people that I thank God for every morning. Lord, I thank you for the Dearborn Christians. One pro of being involved in the Muslim mission field is that you get a lot of networking. A lot of people want to talk to you, and they tell you about people that the other kinds of missions probably do not have that kind of networking. During the time when I was a student in the Bible school, I was invited to speak in a church in Houston. A Christian woman whose daughter married a Muslim man, and they suspect she converted to Islam, heard about the Muslim converts speaking in that Houston church. So she visited that church, and she came to me and she said, I need to talk to you before this. After this, I'm sorry. And then after my speech, she took me aside and she invited me, and I got to meet her husband as well. She told me about her daughter. And ever since then, I've been in touch with that family. They have been recipient of my newsletter. So when I first moved to Dearborn, people were watching how I started to work, especially those who knew me and my supporters, including that woman. And she used to refer me to different missions all the time. And one time she emailed me a link to a mission called the Crescent Project. That was, I think, in March of 2014. And I emailed that ministry. I introduced myself. I said, I'm a former Muslim, a graduate of a Bible school. I have recently moved to the Detroit area. I have a heart for the Muslim ministry, and I'm looking for open doors. A few hours later, a man answered me. His name is Doug Bennett, and he invited me to attend a men's prayer meeting at a certain house in Dearborn. Ever since then, I joined, by the way, the guy who's taking the selfie was the one who answered me when I contacted the Crescent Project. And the guy who is sitting next to me is Scott Cherry. He was supposed to give this presentation, but because of a change in schedule, he could not make it. And I'm glad he's on Zoom. I think he's there to make sure that I say exactly what he wants me to say. And so ever since then, we have been meeting for prayer and or breakfast. And this is the most anticipated time of the week for me. This has been. Since 2014 until now, this is the happiest. I mean, there is nothing that makes me happier than just to hang out with guys and have fun and just talk. And they are Christians, so you do not feel guilty afterwards. And we also talk about the Dearborn field, and if there is any open door for opportunity, and if there is any Muslim family that has recently moved, if there is any Muslim who's receptive to learn the gospel. And so we tell each other what is going on there. And Scott is the most creative, most genius one of this group. The love that he has for God and for the gospel, and the sincere love that he has for his Muslim neighbors. As far as I know, all his neighbors are Muslims. And he lives in Dearborn. And he just comes up with the most bizarre, most unthought of ideas about how to share the gospel in our community in a different way all the time. We give him a hard time on an event that he organized in the end of last summer, in which he invited us and invited his Muslim friends to attend his dog's birthday party. He has a German Shepherd by the name Zorro. Because of my Middle Eastern background, I don't feel comfortable around pets. So he invited me to Zorro's birthday, and I thought he had a Mexican friend. When I went there, it was a dog, and he had an inflatable screen, and he played the cartoon from the Super Book cartoon, when you open the Bible and you see all kinds of things. And so I kind of made a joke about it. I said, do you have like a lottery machine in which you took a ball and it said dog, and another one that said gospel, and another one that said birthday? And he said, oh, how about we preach the gospel by making a dog's birthday party? That's Scott Cherry. We almost got arrested one time when we were having our Christian literature on a table at the University of Michigan's campus in Dearborn. And the police officer came, and a very angry Middle Eastern professor, their female professor, she went to the campus police, and he came and he said, I want you to take down this table and leave the premises. And Scott, being Scott, wanted to negotiate with the police officer, and the police officer said, I mean now. And that's when we started taking the books, and we left the premises at that time. So that's one thing that he did, and he continues to go to the campus. In fact, he has been taking classes there at the University of Michigan for over a decade now, just to be in touch with the 3,000 plus Muslim students there, to look for the opportunity to tell them about Christ all the time. Scott believes that it is the duty of every Christian to look for an opportunity to share Jesus. When we talk about the 4 laws or the 5 steps of salvation, depending on what denomination you came from, I think it all boils down to a change in heart. That we all need to have a new heart when we become Christians, and that heart needs to show the love back to God by doing what He told us to do, and that is by sharing the gospel with our non-Christian friends and have that same enthusiasm for their salvation that we had when we first heard the gospel and we became believers. And so that's what Scott does all the time. And he also uses the studio of the university's campus to record videos on special occasions. Christmas, Easter, talks about the birth of Christ, the death and resurrection of Christ. He organizes events in which people deliver messages, even in hookah lounges. In Dearborn, we did that on Christmas this past year. He organized a lot of door knocking campaigns, and so that's him for you. So, well, one time, I think it was a couple of years ago, right after I published the Arabic version of my book that tells Muslims about Christ. By the way, the book is available for free on my table, the ACM table. It's called the Road to Your Happiness, available in both Arabic and English, written for a Christian to give to his or her Muslim neighbor. There's a disclaimer page at the front. You read that page, you tear it off, you give the rest of the book to your Muslim neighbor, and especially if that Muslim neighbor is already receptive. I cannot do anything that makes somebody who's not receptive. You need to pray for these people's hearts. So Scott suggested in one men's breakfast, how about we advertised a free book signing event at the Hemlock Park. And by the way, he had already been going to Hemlock and he had already been organizing a few events there, but he invited me to join him at one point. He said, bring a case of your books and make a flyer that says free book signing event. And I said, are you kidding me? Who in the world, what Muslim would get a book that screams, I want to convert you to Christ? And actually, I delivered dozens of copies of that book in my first event to Muslims, and they wanted my signature, and I gave it to them, and that's when the park ministry started to come together. I think it was matured even more in the next summer. That would be last year. He had a clearer plan on what to do. So let's talk about the park. Started last summer, and we also started it this summer. We have a few challenges this year that we did not have last year. I will be talking about those challenges and why are we having them this year next in the presentation. Well, so 2 points. First, you get people attention to know that you are there, that you have something to share with them. And so he gets the popcorn, he organizes, and he invites those who want to be involved in this kind of work. Hey, would you like to support this work? Do you have a popcorn machine? Would you bring some hot dogs or some beverages? And so we bring all these kind of things. It was at that time when I met the rest of my band, the Jiran Jammers, so he invited us to play Middle Eastern music in the park. And what else can attract people's attentions to a certain event than music, live music outdoors? By the way, just to give you an idea, that park, I think, as far as I remember, Hemlock Park is the biggest park in Dearborn. Hemlock Park is the biggest park in the global front line between Muslims and Christians. It gets flooded with hundreds of Muslims every day. Most Muslims come from hotter countries, and they're usually outdoors people. They don't stay home at the late afternoon, early evening, and so they go to the park. The streets get filled with people, and you just open the door and you see pretty much everybody you know, your neighbors and your relatives who live close to you. And Muslims do that in Dearborn as well. A lot of them meet in the park. And so this is one video in which we were playing music. This is Scott, of course, holding the microphone. Doing that, we get people attention. They start showing up, and then they see our tables where we have our Christian literature, and then they start talking. A lot of people ask me, how can I start a spiritual conversation with my Muslim neighbor? Many people don't feel comfortable with that, actually. A lot of people are surprised when they learn that I am an introvert. My Bible school made me a public speaker, but I feel more comfortable speaking to 100,000 people than starting a conversation with one person. Totally understand that. So here is my answer to the question. You do not need to, they will. Muslims will start talking about the faith. They will try to challenge you because they believe that Christ is not the way to God and that Islam is the way to God. And because unfortunately, as Josh McDowell said, most Christians do not know why they believe what they believe. Muslims think you do not have any foundation to stand on. They think you do not have any argument. And so usually when they come over, they start asking questions and they start getting engaged. And this is, by the way, another selfie video that Scott took. This is the inflatable screen where we played The Chosen film.
We had on a Tuesday night. Today I was thinking maybe we got to march around the whole park 7 times. But of course, that's a different story. Anyway, we're doing some different things today. Let me turn the camera around. So usually we put the movie under that shelter. You know what? And not that many people have been coming to see the movie.
Pay attention to this shit. I will be coming back to it later in a few minutes.
Inhibiting. So tonight we put the screen outside of the shelter, facing the opposite direction, and facing the walking path here. So right there's the walking path, and people just do laps around and around and around. And well, this is working. I mean, it's not like still off the chain or anything, but people can't resist, I guess. I mean,
anyway, that proved a quick success, and every believer in the Detroit vicinity that heard about the park ministry wanted to get involved somehow, especially those who had the time to show up at or on Tuesday evenings at the time. We used to do it every Tuesday evening, and I think he has a different plan for this year. He said that some Muslims decided that since they expect to see us there on Tuesday evenings, they would not show up at the park during that day. So we are choosing a different day every week now. And I think he has a schedule for that. And you can see people from different denominations. The local churches there are excited about that. It's fun. You go there, you meet your own friends in a park, and everything is so happy. I mean, finally, we have found a way to share the gospel with Muslims. And different people have different approaches to share the gospel. Not all do the same thing. You will see someone, friend of mine, dear friend of mine, his name is Shane. Shane is a very bold evangelist, and he's the answer to the question, what if polemics had facial hair? I mean, he just go there. He goes there. I have never had that gift, that skill that he had. And he is married to a very bold evangelist as well. She's from Albania, and there's a story about her trying to share Jesus with a Muslim woman last year when an Arab Muslim police officer came and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" She said, "I'm talking to her." He said, "Did you try to share the gospel with her?" She said, "Well, I'm talking about life in general, but I also wanted to share Christ with her." He literally asked her, "Can I see your ID, please?" Well, that situation was very sad, and it was taken care of at the time, and that officer will not do that again. But I told that woman, if that happens to me, my support would double. I mean, I want that to go down on my resume, for a police officer to say, "I want to see your ID because I have been telling someone about Christ." So this is one of the challenges that I will be talking about in detail in a few minutes. But anyway, when the conversation starts, make sure that you steer the conversation in a way that makes you ask questions about Islam. Do not claim that you know anything about Islam, even if you are a former Muslim, while boldly answering their questions about the Christian faith. I live a daily encounter with the fact that Muslims respect a strong Christian that knows his or her Bible more than they respect a friendly Christian that does not know his Bible, which implies you need to read your Bible on a daily basis and always be ready to provide an answer to those who ask about the hope that is in you. Make sure when you share the gospel, you do not give the impression that you are talking about people versus people. It is not my people are better than your people. It is you and I are standing at the same side toward that one absolute truth that we are both accountable to follow. By the way, there is one thing, among other things, in common between Islam and Christianity. They both believe that there is only one way to God. Christ says, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except by me. Islam says in chapter 3, truly the acceptable religion in the sight of God is Islam. And it says later in verse 85, whoever follows a religion other than Islam, it will not be accepted from him. So you can follow either this or that, but don't you dare. They are two alternative ways to God because they both disagree with you. And so make sure, because that's unfortunately, because of the social aspect of the Middle East, the unique situation of the Middle East, there are the prejudices between the traditionally Muslim Arabs and the traditionally Christian Aramaic speaking Chaldean, Assyrian, Armenian Copts there. Muslims see themselves being prejudiced against by Christians. They don't have the best exposure to God or to Christ or to the Bible through those people. It is very unfortunate. And it's not totally those Christian people's fault. A lot of things happened in the Middle East in the past 1400 years or 2000 years. And so you need to put that in mind, because people will think, as much as you expect them to be grateful that you're bringing the message of eternal hope and of salvation and of eternal life, they think they are there to offend them because you hate them, and you are there to offend their culture or their families, and you want to make sure that this is not what you're there for. So we need to be careful. And so there is that. And once again, let's talk about the motive before we talk about the means. And I will be talking about the motive in detail. We're talking about the means now. We're talking about how to preach the gospel with Muslims. A more important question is, why should I share the gospel with Muslims? Anyway, this is another clip that Scott made.
Yeah, we're at Hemlock Park. It's Thursday night. Now this is unique. I mean, this is not us, actually. I mean, it's us, but it's not us. It's Christians. It's
us, but it's
the kingdom
not
of
us.
God.
Everybody give it up for Scott Jerry.
People doing evangelism and face painting, right? But this is quite a bit more of an extravaganza than we usually do on Tuesday nights. This is mainly a cooperative effort between a church in Novi, Michigan. It's called Brightmoor Assembly of God Church, or maybe just Brightmoor Church nowadays. And
so these are the situations in which people generally got involved. They said, hey, can I stand next to a table? Can I do face painting? Can I bring some food or beverages? But then people actually got involved in very heated conversations about the gospel and Christianity versus Islam. He invited me plus other speakers to deliver bilingual gospel messages. Sometimes he would have the same person deliver the message in two languages. Sometimes he would get interpreters. And this was what started this year's event. And it was a message about Memorial Day and how we should remember the sacrifices of the men and women in uniform that made it possible for us to enjoy what we are enjoying here. How we also talk about Christ's sacrifice that made it possible for us to enjoy a more eternal privilege with him.
متمتعين ومسرورين ومباركين بجيرتك، ولكننا نريد أن نكون جيرانك إلى الأبد، إلى ما لا نهاية، أن نكون جيرانك في أبدية لا فيها موت ولا ألم ولا حزن ولا عصرة قلب. بارك الله بكم وتمتعوا بباقي هذا اليوم في حديقة هملاك. Now I will speak in English. The United States is commemorating today the Memorial Day, where every average good citizen needs to meditate on the fact that we are enjoying in the United States what we are enjoying, because those men and women in uniform have chosen to lay down.
This is another message that Scott himself delivered, and he asked me to interpret for it. And as you can see, that probably you could see in all those other videos, there are a lot of Muslims that are actually there, pausing, standing, listening to the message.
Of the Torah, they tell us stories with symbols, and those symbols represent things that God wants us to learn and what He wants us to know now.
كانت هذه السفينة هي رمز لخطة أخرى ولشيء آخر، والكتاب المقدس ممتلئ بالرموز التي ترمز إلى أشياء أخرى، وهناك رسالة يريد الله منا أن نتعلمها.
And this is an example of a very heated engagement between Muslims and Christians.
You're just a thought. Do you understand? That's different than actually it being existent.
The world would also
That's
be
totally
pre-existent.
different. How do you not see that?
The world.
What I'm saying is not invalid.
The world.
I'm not saying it's invalid.
The world would also be
Shane, the
pre-existent.
one,
he's
the one I
saying-
told you
when
about is the one in the middle on the right.
Then that statement makes no sense. Why would he
Yeah.
separate himself in distinction from the world if the
didn't
world was just as
He
eternal
does.
as he
He
was?
does. He does.
He said
John chapter
before
8.
the world
He does.
began.
Let me chime in on this.
All
So
right.
can you read the verse?
Yeah. So
with
let-
the disciples where he says.
Yeah, I'll
they
get
are
to that. I'll get to that.
Do they
I
have
just-
that glory too?
No. Hang on.
Read the passage.
Yeah, hang on. So my point is taking it into context. We'll compare this with what you're talking about in John 17.
sure.
Okay?
But
So-
I considered all the context.
Yeah. Well, I don't
didn't
think
rip
you are.
anything
I'm
away
gonna
from
I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't think you are because
Which part did I ignore?
the part where he says the Father and I are one.
I just told you we're
I
going to
understand.
contextualize it with another
No,
place
no.
where he says it
no,
about
no.
other people.
I'm telling you to
So you're ripping
contextualize
it out of the
it. No,
context.
I'm not. I'm keeping it in this chapter. You want to put it in another chapter. I'm saying
You just
hear me out.
read
Hear me
chapter
out.
10
Hear
and
me out.
chapter
Hear
8
me out.
previously.
Hear me out. Hear me out. Hear me
How
out.
about we just read the whole chapter?
Yeah, we
and don't
could. We
talk?
could. What I'm saying.
Unfortunately, the East in general is not into debates and argument and counter-argument and negotiations as the West is. The situation is not like this now. The situation was not that 10 years ago. The situation was not that 2,000 years ago. And Paul points this out when he talks about how the Jews look for a sign and the Greeks look for wisdom. In fact, recently I have finished Herodotus' histories. And in his time, 4 centuries before Christ, 5 centuries before Christ, he talks about the difference between the Greeks who liked to talk and negotiate and do those debates, and the Persians that represented the East at the time, and their dictatorship and the despotism of the East. And so not all Muslims were happy. Most of them are. They like seeing us. They like to debate. They like to talk. A few of them are interested. In fact, a few of them even responded, as we will talk in a few minutes. But a few of them were not happy, including this man. And if you are familiar with the Muslim culture, the most radical spectrum of the Sunni part of Islam, the Wahhabi part, usually wear shorter gowns, dishdasha, dress, whatever you call it. So you can tell that this man is a very serious, very devout, radical Muslim. And he was angry. What are you doing there? Why are you distributing Christian literature to our family members and our children and all? And I wanted to take a video. I could not. By the way, you can see my book, the second one from the left, the one in blue. And so it's very unfortunate that I could not take a video of his input on what we were doing. A few minutes later, he gathered a few of his Muslim friends and they did their Islamic ritual prayers right in front of us, which I was like, come on. And this is one of the challenges. By the way, we have in Iraq we have a joke about the short dishdasha, the short gown, because in Iraq we have the Sunnis and the Shiites make fun of the Sunnis, and this Shiite asked a Sunni, he said, why do you Sunnis wear shorter gowns? So the radical Sunni told him, because, and this is once again a joke, he said, because in our faith, the more knowledgeable in Islam you are, the shorter your gown should be. So the Shiite said, does that mean that your Ayatollah only wears a collar? And well, that guy reminded me of that joke. And so we are talking about how we are doing the park ministry. Let's talk about the other 5 W's. And before we talk about that, let's talk about the challenges. And this is one of the challenges that we had, that a few of them were not happy. In fact, there was this one Muslim woman who thinks that she lives in an interesting part of history where any woman can make any claim against any man, regardless of the substantiation, and the expected response should be, we need to take this allegation seriously and the man needs to be held accountable. And if you throw in a few keywords that can raise a few eyebrows, then your job is done. And that is what a certain Muslim woman did. She commented on Facebook on the Legacy Conference last year in the Dearborn Park. She was talking about 3 siblings, quote, 3 unaccompanied minors at the table where these ghoulish predators stand in deception, pretending they love all, but only loving those who enter their cult. She called us ghoulish predators. She said, seriously, their eyes were all soulless. And she said that we are predators and we are there targeting their children. She said later in that post, and of course, by the way, a claim like that gets a lot of likes and shares and angry comments. She said, I shared this so that you all inform your families, neighbors, and masjid communities. Masjid is a mosque. They pulled a permit to show a film there next Saturday. So they'll probably have tons of treats for the kids playing in the park. She's imagining us evangelists as the minivan ice cream truck driver that is there to entice kids. By the way, these folks are fluent in Arabic with a number of native speakers. So I am concerned kids will be deceived by that. And unfortunately, there was a response to that when we tried to get a permit to use that shelter that I showed you this year. Scott went to the city of Dearborn and he wanted to ask about that, and an Arab Muslim member of the city of Dearborn stood and he said they are using these facilities to try to convert us, and so we should not agree. And the current mayor of Dearborn, who's an Arab Muslim himself, did not totally brush this off. He said, let's put it on the table, let's talk about it later. And so we still did not get the permit to use that shelter that you saw in the past slides for this year. This is one of the challenges that we have. Also, another challenge is that we do not have as many volunteers as we would expect. When we talk about ministering to Muslims, everybody's like, I want to be involved in this kind of ministry. I want to go and share the gospel with Muslims. And when the event shows up, nobody is there, nobody is available, and this is very unfortunate. In fact, I'm not making an exaggeration. Last week, when I was collecting the data for this presentation, I specifically asked Scott, did you have any request from anyone who wanted to join this park ministry? He said, I did not. Unfortunately, the opposition is not from Muslims only. When I moved to the Dearborn area, as people were trying to provide me with all the resources and the contacts that I needed to start the Arab Christian ministry, including that woman that referred me to the Crescent Project, I received an email from a woman that works for the World English Institute, a ministry that is affiliated with the Churches of Christ. I'm a volunteer teacher there. She forwarded an email that was written by a preacher who says he used to live in Dearborn. He lives now in South Dakota. This is what he says about Dearborn. Once a nice city on a continuing downhill side. I always forget I need my glasses. It's that part of my life where I forget I am getting old. Once a nice city on a continuing downhill side. You can't work in the school system front offices if you don't speak Arabic now and need to know many dialects, as some Arabs can't understand others' Arabic language. By the way, this is false. Everything that I will read is written by a preacher in an email circulated enthusiastically by Christians in my own church. And he is saying the exact opposite of what a Christian should be. I strive to try to introduce to my Muslim neighbors a God that claims to be love and a Christ that claims to be the truth. While Muslims see what my own friends, Christian friends, post on the social media, and they see everything but love and truth. And this is one example. Everybody goes back to the homeland for months and expects to get passed on to the next grade. It's crazy as I am at ground zero on this. Kids Assuming girls, I can't tell for sure, roaming the hallways in full-blown burqas. Kids attending classes that can't speak or understand English. By the way, we have some of the smartest school kids in Dearborn ever. Those who live in the Detroit vicinities can tell you that some of the best doctors in the medical system there are Arab Muslims themselves. He says later, after being dropped off in Land Rovers and the car of choice here, Mercedes or Escalade, it is very common to have 3 families live in one house. All garages are being converted into living spaces. He says later, if this doesn't scare you, you haven't been watching what has happened to our country in the recent years. He says later, have we gone completely nuts? The camel's nose is officially in the tent in Michigan. When Christians hear and read these kind of emails and see these kind of posts in the social media over and over again, guess how much more enthusiastic they become to share the gospel with their Muslim neighbors. By the way, there are 2 kinds of people. Those who have met real-life Muslims and those who have not met real-life Muslims. It is impossible for me to reason with you now that Muslims can be very hard-working, good citizens and good neighbors to you. And of course, there are the good and the bad in every culture. Now, Muslims are not saved, but that does not necessarily mean they are evil. And this is a counterproductive tone to use. And this has not done us any good. So now in Michigan, he says, when you call the public assistance office, you are told to, quote, press 1 for English, press 2 for Spanish, and press 3 for Arabic, exclamation point. This is outrageous. Your tax dollars is at work. And so this is another challenge that we have to deal with, not necessarily specifically in the park work, but in general, regarding this ministry to, or this intriguing kind of the ministries to the Muslim world. And that has influenced the finances and the support that we raised for the park ministry. I am not updated on the budget. I'm pretty sure Scott can correct me on that. This is the paper that I have, that with all the talk of we need to go to the Muslim world, we need to share the gospel with Muslims, with all the eyes watching us, those who are in the Detroit area, the support that we asked, as far as I know, was $6,300. We only could raise $3,550. And so if you want to be involved in that work, you make sure you contact Scott Cherry, or probably he has a mechanism for you too. For example, if you can provide us with some of the facilities of the city of Dearborn for us to use, you can directly go to the city of Dearborn and please help us to keep this work going. Anything that you do can help us. If you contribute $5, we can buy 2 popcorn bags that we can use to attract Muslims to come over so that we can tell them about Christ. And so the question is, with all these challenges, why are we doing what we are doing? Once again, because of the unique nature of the Muslim ministry, I know that we need to put faces to stories. I cannot do that here. So you need to take my word for what is happening. First of all, a former Muslim has come to Christ directly because of the park ministry. An Arab woman, recent immigrant. She is a single mother, and she came to Christ. As far as I know, she was baptized into Christ in a local church in Dearborn last week, and she started to regularly attending that church. Another man who knows about Christ has become a believer, and he had a better understanding and a more accurate understanding of the gospel, and he started attending that same church. Once again, directly as a result of the ministry that we are doing, and we can talk about that in private, or you can contact Scott Cherry to know the details about these people. The Muslim man that was sitting at the back of the table to your left during the debate clip, that has become a regular friend of us, and every time we talk about the gospel, he's there to debate in a very friendly way, a very civilized way. And so there's that. This kind of ministry has caught the attention of other communities that have Muslim populations there in their cities and in their towns. The last speaking engagement I had was in Odessa, Texas. And I talked about the park ministry at the Sherwood Church of Christ. And the minister said, I need to get you back to talk about how we can do a similar thing in our park. And so there are people who are inspired now to launch a similar process in their own communities. The event also caught the attention of a local Christian TV channel that invited us to talk about that park ministry. Hopefully people will learn that there has always been work among Muslims. There is this idea that people like this preacher that wrote this email have been promoting, that it is impossible for you to share the gospel with Muslims, and if you do that, then you will die. And that is totally not true. There has always been work among Muslims. There have always been Muslims coming to Christ in the past 1400 years. And so you decide, would you like to be part of this work? Not necessarily the park ministry, but would you like that one Muslim friend that you know, that you actually love so much that you want to be stuck with for all the eternity? Would you like to share the gospel with him or her or not? Because people have done that already, and it works. If it did not work with that person, you move on, you share the gospel with someone else. This has been the how part of doing the ministry. Let's talk about the 5 W's. Who is invited to be involved in the park ministry or in general in sharing the gospel? Any Christian who believes that the Great Commission is for all of us, that we are all commissioned to take the gospel to all nations. Any Christian who believes that you do not need to be an ordained evangelist to share the gospel. Any Christian who has ever prayed for an open door for the ministry, well, this is an open door, unless you have an open door closer to your community and to your own life. What are we doing there? Well, we are there to share the gospel with as many souls as the Lord has disposed. We are not there to be jerks. We are not there to fight with Muslims. We are there because we sincerely look for those people who are receptive so that we can share the gospel with them. When should we do that? Well, as soon as you have that opportunity. Like I said, many people said, I want to go to the Muslim mission field and I want to share the gospel. Not now, or probably never, or probably later. Well, as soon as you have your own opportunity, or as soon as somebody provides you with his or her own opportunity, then this is when you should start. Where? Many people say, well, the Lord led me to go to Africa. The Lord told me to go to Asia and share the gospel in India, for example. The Lord did not directly tell me that. He probably did, and I did not hear him. In my mind, the Lord has already spoken when he commanded us to take the gospel and make disciples among all nations, to take the gospel of all nations and to preach it to all creatures. And so the Lord has already provided me with an unlimited list of options. And so wherever you like the best, and I like my community. I live in Taylor, which is 20 minutes away from Dearborn, and I plan to stay there. And I plan to continue to do the same work there. So to me, the answer is in Dearborn. Now, what's the answer to you? You choose where do you want to preach the gospel. Like I said, I usually think and I can feel that God has been talking to me only in retrospect. I can see God working only in the rear view mirror. If God is talking to you in a different way, make sure you follow that calling as a Christian. Why should we share the gospel with Muslims? Let me put it this way. There is that one sincere, truth-seeking Muslims that has seen what Islam has done to the Muslim world in the past 2 or 3 decades. That soul is looking for you to teach him or her the gospel. It is frustrating that you spend a lot of resources and times and efforts and prayers trying to share the gospel with a Muslim who does not respond. I promise you it is more frustrating to know later in life that you have crossed paths with a sincere, truth-seeking Muslim and you did not share the gospel with him or her. A lot of us are familiar with the story of David Livingstone, arguably the greatest evangelist in the modern history. He was a Scottish explorer and an evangelist in Africa. He is labeled the greatest missionary of Africa. And he was lost one time, well, near the end of his life. For 6 years, he was isolated from the rest of the world. And Henry Morton Stanley led an expedition of 100 plus porters to go to Africa to look for that one man who has been lost for 6 years. He had made a lot of discoveries. He shared the gospel. And he was important. He was an important figure. He was Scottish, and Henry, I think, was Welsh, and he led over 100 people. Many of them deserted during that 700-mile journey in the rainforests of Africa. Many of them got diseased, got sick and died. His own horse got bit by a tsetse fly and died. And it took them 8 months before they saw Dr. Livingstone. And when he saw him, he told him the most British thing ever, in a phrase that we quoted humorously. Dr. Livingstone, I presume? 2 British people in Africa. Of course I'm Dr. Livingstone. You've been looking for me all along. If Dr. Livingstone is that precious to that expedition, to that team, to the New York Herald newspaper that funded that team, I promise you every Muslim soul is more precious to God. And God wants to lead us as members and porters of his expedition to look for that one Muslim soul. An interesting part of David Livingstone's story, the greatest evangelist in Africa. Do you know how many souls did he convert? Only 1. During his whole work, the greatest evangelist of Africa converted only 1 soul. I am saying this to remind us that we are living in a world that has been deceived by the competition of the commercials and the advertisement. We think now that any mission that does not end up with a panoramic picture of 200 baptisms in 1 week-long mission tour is not worth it. But this is not how the church has worked in the past 2,000 years. Every single soul is worth your effort and multiple people's effort to go to that one receptive soul and share the gospel with him or her and save him or her. That's where I am talking about the motive. We talked about the means, how to share the gospel. Make sure you have the right motive. Why do you want to share the gospel? Is it because Muslims scare you? Is it because you want to make a political statement? Is it because Muslims did not vote for the political party you voted for, and so you want to convert them so that they can change their political affiliation? Is it because the head cover scares you? I spoke in a church in Arkansas a few years ago, and after I spoke, this church grandma came to me. She told me that a few days prior, she went to buy some feminine hygiene articles at midnight in a grocery store, a local grocery store in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, in the middle of nowhere. And she saw a Muslim woman with a head cover on grocery shopping. And she said, I randomly asked her, why are you grocery shopping at midnight? She said, the woman immediately started to cry. I said, why are you crying? What did I say to you? She said, you have no idea what people tell me when I come in the daytime. Go back home, go back to your where you came from. Are you here to blow up this place? Are you here to slit our throats? And so if you have this attitude toward the Muslim people, I totally understand that if your only exposure to Islam is 9/11, then it is not possible for you to have that motive. If you don't love them that much, move on and share the gospel with somebody that you sincerely love. Probably your own relatives or your own neighbors, your own neighbors. You know that there are thousands of them who are not saved and they're waiting for you to share the gospel. But don't you dare share the gospel with Muslims if you do not love them that much. I spoke in over 200 churches in the past 7 years, and I think it is unfair that there is a certain book of the Bible that was almost never quoted. And I think this is my opportunity to quote the Song of Solomon. The book says in chapter 3, starting with verse 1, the book at the surface is a love story between a man and his wife. And the Shulamite woman says, by night on my bed, I sought the one I love. I sought him, but I did not find him. I will rise now, I said, and go about the city, in the streets and in the squares. I will seek the one I love. I sought him, but I did not find him. The watchman, verse 3, who go about the city found me. I said, have you seen the one I love? Verse 4, scarcely had I passed by them when I found the one I love. I held him, and I would not let him go until I had brought him to the house of my mother and into the chamber of her who conceived me. The rabbinical tradition has always considered that since this book is in the Bible, this may be an allegory of the love between God and Israel. By extension, we in the New Testament time may also take it as a love story, the allegory of the love between Christ and his church, or between God and the soul. I believe that God has built in every soul the desire to look for him, as much as that Shulamite woman was looking for the one whom she loved. God has put in all of us to look for him. Yes, we get distracted by the tradition, the community, the support system, the spouse and the family. But if you ever believe that Christ is the way and that Islam is not the way, then you know that Muslims will have that hunger and thirst and they're looking for God. Similarly, Isaiah also said in chapter 26 and verse 9 of his book, "With my soul I have desired you in the night. Yes, by my spirit within me I will seek you early. For when your judgments are in the earth, the inhabitants of the world will learn righteousness." It is in people's hearts to look for God. Make sure you join that expedition to look for that one soul that is looking for the gospel, and make sure you share that gospel with them.